Hello, this is Ben Moore, Finance Manager for the Office of Community Assistance, and this video will help walk you through budgeting for travel and training. This video covers budget line items 103 and 112 in the Program Support category, and line items 303 and 312 in the Administration category. The travel and training lines are grouped together to include both program support and direct admin lines. Pay special attention to what items specifically belong in admin or apply those portions of costs that pertain to admin staff to the direct admin lines. The items that must be charged to admin for travel are lodging, per diem, and transportation costs for administrative staff while attending trainings or conferences and performing assigned grant program activities. Please note that for the CSBG, DOE, and HHS weatherization grants only, because there is a separate TNTA allocation on line 402, the costs charged to the travel category would be those that exceed the amount that can be accommodated by the allocation in the line 402 for TNTA. Additionally, all board member travel expenses would be charged to admin or the 303 category. The minimum requirements for the cost grid detail on the travel budget are that you need to list each training or conference and program activity trip separately. For the trainings or conferences, the basis that you need to use is the total cost per person, and the quantity column should be completed by putting the number of people traveling. The minimum requirements for the narrative section of the travel budget are that you need to explain the number of people traveling, the cost per person, and the number of nights or days, the per diem, and the lodging and the transportation costs. The lodging, the per diem, and mileage rates may not exceed the federal travel rates, so please ensure that they don't. If you do utilize rates that are higher than the federal travel rates, the excess amount could be a disallowed cost. If staff travel mileage rate is budgeted, then you must state in your narrative that the travel mileage rate is reimbursement for mileage when an employee is using their personal vehicle for grant program activities. The items to generally include in the travel budget are lodging, per diem, and transportation costs for staff while attending trainings, conferences, and performing assigned grant program activities. Again, please remember that the CSBG, DOE, and HHS weatherization grants, because they have a TNTA allocation, you would only budget the excess of travel that can't be accommodated in TNTA. You would also include fuel for agency vehicles used for staff's assigned grant program activities, and you would budget mileage used to reimburse employees while using their own personal vehicles for their assigned grant program activities as well. Items to not include in travel would be conference and training fees, conference and training fees must be budgeted in the training and education, or the 112 and 312 line items, or TNTA line 402 if that category is available. This budget category, travel, does not include travel expenses paid to a consultant. Those must be budgeted in the consultant category, which is 107 for program support and 307 for admin. Here is an example of how you might budget for the travel and training category. As you'll notice here, there are a couple conferences listed. There's a WIPLE conference and an OCA workshop, and they also itemized vehicle fuel. If you'll notice in the WIPLE conference, the cost is $316, and that is listed under the total cost per person as far as the basis. The quantity here represents the number of people traveling, as I mentioned on the previous slide, and the number of trips is 1. So the total amount budgeted for this trip is $632, which is the $316 per person times the 2 people traveling. But if you'll notice down in the narrative, there's a lot more detail, and this is how we'd like it presented. So for the WIPLE conference, it shows $632 total, and it breaks it down by detailing that 2 people will be staying for 2 nights at $96 a night as far as lodging, and that equals $384. There's $28 per day per diem for the 3 days, so that's $168. A round trip train ticket at $40 each for 2 individuals is $80. So this breaks out what is made up of the $632 above. So that is how we'd like you to present the travel and training budget tab. So items that must be charged to admin for training and education are the registration cost for administrative staff and board members attending trainings and conferences. Again, for CSBG, DOE, and HHS weatherization, please remember the caveat regarding the fact that you would only charge excess costs here if they can't be absorbed by the allocation you've been given in TNTA on line 402. The minimum requirements for the cost grid for training and education. You must list the registration fees for each conference or training separately, similar to how you did on the travel budget tab. You would use the quantity column to show the number of attendees, and for the basis, you would write in registration fee per person or cost per person, and the cost is the amount per person. The minimum requirements for the narrative section of training and education, you must list the individual conferences or trainings budgeted and the number of staff attending each. You would need to provide the rationale for attending the conference or training as well. So items in general to include in the training and education tab would be registration costs for staff attending training and conferences. You would also include training materials such as pamphlets, notebooks, videos, or other various handouts that you order for specific training activities. Typically, those would be for in-house trainings, either that your staff perform or materials you buy to allow someone that you contract to come in and provide training. Again, just a reminder again about the TNTA that costs typically would be budgeted here for CSBG, DOE, and HHS weatherization only if they have utilized all of the line 402 TNTA funds available. So items not to include in training education, similar to travel, but on the other end here, you would not include travel costs in the training and education. All of those conference and training related travel costs would go in line 103 for program support or 303 for administration, because they are the travel costs. In last year and more so a couple years ago, many of our budgets were kicked back from our accounting department because travel costs were put in training and education, and some training and education costs were put in the travel category. So please pay special attention that those go in the proper category to avoid your grant budget getting kicked back to you. So do not include salaries and fringe in training and education. Those costs must be budgeted in personnel 101 or 301 or fringe 102 and 302 accordingly. Do not include the cost of consultants brought in to give training. Those must be budgeted in the consulting tab 107 or 307. Please remember that we have separate videos available as guides to completing each of the individual cost tabs in the budget spreadsheet. Thanks for watching.